What's up? Welcome to Journey in the Self. I'm your host, Sarah. Initially, we were going to do a show on the Maha Kumbh Mela, but unfortunately, my guest was unable to join us. So we always have contingency plans, and all is in divine order. It appears that the universe wants us to do a follow-up show on our series on Donald Trump inside our establishment. So we will do that. And just as an aside, though this is a spiritual show, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're involved in human drama. And we all have a part to play in the human drama. So spirituality is not an escape from life. It is instructions on how to navigate life effectively. And so we're supposed to play our part in the divine drama. And where there is disharmony, a lack of balance, when Ma'at is not in place, or as the Indian term Dharma, when the opposite of Dharma exists, Adharma, it's necessary for us to stand up for establishment of Dharma and Ma'at. And so we have a responsibility as spiritual people to fight those who would prevent the dominance of Dharma, the Dharma and Ma'at from prevailing in the universe, and fight to restore Ma'at and Dharma. And so, we don't just go hide in a cave in the Himalayas or sit in our room and meditate. We have to also, face what's going on in life. And certainly, you hear the dogs have a lot to say about the situation as well. But we see that there's a lot of disruption going on in the country in terms of the economic picture with the tariffs contributing to increasing inflation. The political environment seems to be moving deeper into fascism, and people seem to be okay with it. Reminding me of the scene in Revenge of the Sith, where people were cheering Emperor Palpatine as he was galvanizing his control over the what became to be the Empire. The same seems to be occurring now, but the groundwork was laid for that in the prior administration, the previous time that Trump was in office. But as we have shown and will continue to show, that he's not making those decisions on his own. He's carrying out a game plan. We mentioned before that much of what is going on now was foretold and laid out in, I think it was called Project 2025. That position paper was written by a think tank, and think tanks are typically controlled by the wealthy elite who put out these type of programs for the politicians to administer. So this is not Trump's program. This is a program that's been given to him. Okay, and so the last time we did the show, we drew on information and basically went over the information provided in this publication here, the Fitzpatrick Informer, written by Timothy Fitzpatrick. And as you see here, this was written in November of 2016, covering the period that Trump was previously in office. But it's relevant because it gives a good breakdown of the type of people that Trump has associated with, those who influence, or you could say control. It says here, Trump controlled by the KGB Mossad. Part 2, the KGB is the intelligence agency of the State of Israel. So here you see a picture. So it was taken on July 28, 2019, showing two giant Israeli Likud party election banners hanging from a building, showing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shaking hands with U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, with a caption above reading, Netanyahu in another league in the coastal Mediterranean city of Tel Aviv. Okay, it goes on to say, Trump's 9/11 lie. And before I go on with this, I want to say that much of the information, if not all of it, that's provided in this article by Timothy Fitzpatrick, I have validated from other sources. And that's why I feel comfortable with showing this, even though, you see that, he has his perspective about things. I won't say whether I agree or disagree. But I found the information to be accurate from validating it from other sources. Okay, so it says Trump's 9/11 lie about dancing Muslims helps Mossad cover up. Okay, so this is going back to 9/11, where the blame for that situation where the planes were supposedly run into the towers by some Arabs who stole these planes and miraculously learned how to fly them and crash them into the World Trade Center buildings. And they mysteriously collapsed, though they were built to be able to withstand a plane running into them, and the fact that jet fuel does not run hot enough to be able to melt the steel girders. And so that was a controlled demolition, but that's kind of a side note. But we know that from looking at the way the towers fell, that was a controlled demolition. Okay, and so what he's saying here, though the evidence, all the evidence points to the fact that that was a controlled demolition, and that it was not carried out by uh, Arab terrorists. Trump affirmed the official story. So again, if Trump was an outsider, why would he be affirming the official story about 9/11 when it was clearly not the case that Arabs hijacked those planes or stole those planes and rammed them into the World Trade Center, causing them to collapse? So it says late last year, Donald Trump reaffirmed the 9/11 story, carefully designed by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Israel's Mossad, perpetuated by the Jewish dominated American media. He lied about a very important event in the 9/11 story, what has come to be known as the dancing Israelis. Hey, I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down, Trump told rally goers in Birmingham, Alabama on November 21st, 2015. And I watched in New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering. By the context of his speech, he implied that it was thousands of Muslims cheering in the streets of Jersey. Then a day later, Trump confirmed in an interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos that he was indeed talking about Muslims. There were people that were cheering on the other side of New Jersey, where you have large Arab populations. They were cheering as the World Trade Center came down. I know it might not be politically correct for you to talk about it, but there were people cheering as that building came down, as those buildings came down. And that tells you something. It was well covered at the time, George. Now, I know they don't like to talk about it. It was well covered at the time. There were people over in New Jersey that were watching it, a heavy Arab population that were cheering as the buildings came down. Not good. And here it says, even the Jewish controlled New York Times couldn't accept the preposterous claims by Trump. How alarmed were New Jersey officials by reports of Muslims dancing in the streets of Jersey City and Patterson on September 11, 2001, to celebrate the destruction of the World Trade Center? They feared riots would break out and were ready to send in the National Guard and the state police to preserve order. But John J. Farmer Jr., then the New Jersey Attorney General and the state's chief law enforcement officer, said on Tuesday that he ordered an investigation that very day and found the reports to be bogus, more wild stories born in the stricken hours after the attacks. However, the New York Times and the rest of the mainstream media joined Trump in covering up the 9/11 conspiracy overall because they admitted the real dancing celebrants, who were actually a small group of Israelis, likely working as Mossad operatives, possibly having been involved in the conspiracy itself. This, despite that, the New York Times embarrassingly was among the first to break the true story of the dancing Israelis celebrating on 9/11. Did they cite their old story from 9/11 in the midst of Trump's controversial lie about 9/11? No, they would rather pretend that the story didn't exist. So they're saying that initially, the New York Times did identify that the people who were actually dancing and celebrating in the streets were Israelis. And I have seen footage myself of those very Israelis celebrating, giving high fives as the towers were tumbling down. Um, And I think it's pretty easy to find. You can find that on YouTube, but there's a number of DVDs that I have in my possession that document that. Here it just shows Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner sharing a laugh at 9/11 conspirator and former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak in September. Barak has also flown on Predator Jeffrey Epstein's private jet and is listed in his contact book. And if you will recall, we went through a chapter from the book Dead Men Tell No Lies, and that was a book about Jeffrey Epstein. The New York Times reported Thursday that a group of 5 men had set up video cameras aimed at the Twin Towers prior to the attack on Tuesday and were seen congratulating one another afterwards. On September 20th, 2001, 9 days after the attack on the World Trade Center, it came out in the American Free Press that these celebrants were Israelis and that New York police arrested them shortly after witnesses reported their strange behavior. At least 3 different groups of Israelis, some of whom may have ties to Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, were taken into custody after eyewitnesses reported them celebrating in several locations across the river from Lower Manhattan in New Jersey. Now remember, Trump said they were Muslims celebrating in New Jersey, but the real story, which was originally reported in the New York Times, identifies the people who were celebrating as Israelis. Again, why would Trump do that unless he was given orders to do so? In 2 cases, the men were reportedly videotaping the initial kamikaze attack on the World Trade Center in New York. All of the detained Israelis are connected to Israeli-owned moving companies operating out of New Jersey and New York. One group is reported to have been in Liberty State Park in Jersey City. Another was seen in Liberty Park in Union City, and a third was apprehended on the roof of an Israeli-owned moving company. The New York Jewish Forward newspaper corroborated the AFP story, saying at least 2 of the arrested celebrants were Israeli and were there to document the event. The 5 Israelis eventually admitted on Israeli TV that it was they who were at the center of the controversy and discussed their arrest and interrogation by the FBI, which lasted months. The Drug Enforcement Administration called their behavior on 9/11 as suspicious and said it may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity. And you see here, he has links to declassified FBI files on those dancing Israelis in the notes below. It says the van belonged to a Mossad front company called Urban Moving Systems. Around 4 p.m. on September 11, the van was pulled over and 5 Israelis, Sivan and Paul Kurzberg, Yaron Shmuel, Oded Elner, and Omer Marmari, all between 22 and 27 years old, were arrested at gunpoint. One had $4,700 in cash hidden in his sock, while another carried 2 foreign passports. Box cutters were found in the van. Here you see in the caption the picture. He says, our purpose was to document the event. And he's one of those who were dancing in celebration. The American Free Press interviewed one of the police officers involved in the arrest of the dancing Israelis. Trump was given every opportunity by a media that was hanging on his every word to correct his lie to the public. He didn't. And the media wasn't buying it, except for InfoWars' Alex Jones, who, despite initially reporting on the dancing Israeli story, also went right along with Trump's lie. Jones and InfoWars have consistently avoided the many Israeli connections to 9/11 since day one. He's even gone out of his way to say Israel could not carry out these attacks. And when during a Trump rally, writer Martin Hill confronted the would-be president on his 9/11 lie, Trump remained silent. Regardless of the apparent heavy Israeli involvement in 9/11 and its ongoing cover-up, the dancing Israelis in the van depicting the plane crashing the World Trade Center, these could be breadcrumbs deliberately fed to the conspiracy demographic to throw them off the trail of the Russia and this FSB or KGB who may have been involved or even orchestrated 9/11. We will explore this more in future installments of this series. That one I have not corroborated, so I'll have to look into that one. Yeah, so we'll be looking forward to seeing that part. Okay, so Trump and Lucky Larry Silverstein, beneficiary of the 9/11 attacks. I know this one from my study of 9/11, and I remember that it was Larry Silverstein who had purchased the World Trade Center, and he got a really good deal for purchasing it. And as soon as he purchased it, he took out insurance on it. And when they burnt, he got a massive payout from insurance money. Not when they burnt, when they were taken down, when the towers were taken down in the controlled demolition, he profited greatly from the insurance proceeds. Now, he was interviewed. I feel a bit remiss that I don't have the audio of the interview that he gave when they interviewed him about the towers in another building in the park that just collapsed, even though it wasn't even on fire. He said they made the decision to pull it, and the phrase "pull it" refers to a controlled demolition. Okay, so we'll go ahead and continue reading. It says Trump and Lucky Larry Silverstein, beneficiary of the 9/11 attacks. From the very beginning of Donald Trump's campaign for U.S. president in June 2015, Jewish Zionist Michael Glassner has worked as the campaign's national political director. Glassner formerly served on the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC. I'll read that again. From the very beginning of Donald Trump's campaign for U.S. president in June 2015, Jewish Zionist Michael Glassner has worked as the campaign's national political director. Glassner formerly served on the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, one of Israel's biggest Zionist lobbies in Washington. If that weren't enough, Glassner was the one responsible for privatizing the World Trade Center lease shortly before 9/11 for the benefit of Larry Silverstein, who profited in billions from the demolition of the towers. Trump told MSNBC what he thought of Silverstein, his fellow New York real estate tycoon. Larry Silverstein, he's a great guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. It's no wonder Trump has been pushing the official Israeli created story on 9/11. Glassner is but one of dozens and dozens of Jews working for the Trump's campaign. Trump has boasted of his support for Israel on numerous occasions and has even hinted at completing Israel's Oded Yinon plan, which would include invading Iran as well as making Jerusalem Israel's undivided capital. In other words, finally disposing of those pesky Palestinians. Trump crony Rudolph Giuliani, whom is believed to have contributed to the 9/11 conspiracy cover up by promptly destroying and removing the crime scene at the World Trade Center, is a candidate for Trump's cabinet as president. We know he never made that. And here we see Donald Trump with his mentor and lawyer, one-time lawyer, Roy Cohn. You see a young Donald Trump there, flanked by Roy Cohn. The caption says, Roy Cohn, Trump's gay, Jewish handler, mob lawyer, and JFK conspirator, question mark. If the close friendship of a self-reported anti-establishment Republican like Donald Trump with a gay, Jewish, AIDS-infested mobster lawyer named Roy Marcus Cohn seems odd, it's because it is. The late Cohn was not only part of the false opposition, McCarthyite, anti-communist movement of the 1950s, at times working both sides of the political spectrum, but also a Meyer Lansky organized crime syndicate operative who went so far as to serve on the infamous Paramedics Board, which is believed to have been Mossad's key operating front in the conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy. Also, Cohn's Lionel Corporation held shares in Permindex. Cohn became close friends with Trump and also his legal counsel starting in the 1970s. As with almost all of Trump's suspicious associates, Cohn was sexually compromised and apparently enjoyed sexually compromising others. This information is corroborated in Whitney Webb's book, the title escapes me, but I'll remember it. But this information is corroborated in Whitney Webb's book, which is called One Nation Under Blackmail. Okay, so Cohn became close friends with Trump and also his legal counsel starting in the 1970s. As with almost all of Trump's suspicious associates, Cohn was sexually compromised and apparently enjoyed sexually compromising others. It said that Cohn kept cameras in an apartment that he owned where he had sexual parties, much like Jeffrey Epstein did, much like someone who is currently in the news now, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs, or whatever you want to call him. And there's a connection there, clearly. And I'll just say, for the record, that Puffy Combs is a pawn who's a sacrificial lamb. He learned that behavior, and that is a ritual that he learned from those who control Hollywood. And we know who controls Hollywood, so I won't even go there. Like Jeffrey Epstein and his child procurer, Ghislaine Maxwell, Cohn is believed to have used child prostitutes to blackmail politicians, himself not only a homosexual, but also believed to have been involved in the Franklin scandal, a child sex ring that reached the Reagan White House. Cohn aided Roger Stone. Yeah, Roger Stone has some issues as well in that same realm. Cohn aided Roger Stone in Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign. A June 28, 1989 Washington Times expose implicated Republican lobbyist Craig J. Spence in a call boys and crack scandal that appears to be one small piece of the Franklin scandal. The inner workings of the scandal share striking similarities with Virginia Roberts' description of Epstein's blackmail techniques. Cohn is mentioned in the report as an associate of Spence, as well as lawyer and activist Phyllis Schlafly, who was also a regular guest on the Alex Jones show prior to her death earlier this year. Some say that Schlafly and pseudo-conservatives like Jones are part of the right-wing conspiracy centered on the Council for National Policy. Small hats control Hollywood, indeed. Okay, so I said that. Here we see, Figure 3, the Cohn machine, the Kennedy cover-up. See Roy J. Cohn, Joe Bonanno, Lionel Corporation, L.M. Bloomfield, Permindex, connected to JFK assassination. Also connected are Dulles brothers, Thomas E. Dewey, Lee J. Rankin, Eugene Morris, and the Warren Commission. Roger Stone, Trump cheerleader, Cohn associate, and info warrior. Here we see Mr. Roger Stone, top strategist for Carl Palladino, gets a face licking. Leading credence to the theory of leading credence to theory of Cohn as a child sex blackmailer is self-described libertine Roger Stone, a Cohn associate, former advisor to Donald J. Trump, and regular guest on Alex Jones's InfoWars broadcast of late. Roy was not gay, says Roger Stone. Roy was not gay. He was a man who liked having sex with men. Gays were weak, effeminate. He always seemed to have these young blonde boys around. It just wasn't discussed. He was interested in power and access. As Steve Coakley used to tell us, the forked tongue, right? He was not gay, but he liked having sex with men. Power and access. Sounds like the life ambitions of Donald Trump, doesn't it? Now we can see why Trump found such a mentor in Cohn. It seems that Stone, a man who has been spotted marching in gay pride parades, was close enough to the homosexual and possible pederast Cohn that he helped cover up Mossad's and possibly Cohn's leading role in cover-up of the JFK assassination when he published a book blaming LBJ for the entire thing. Stone's book also implicates Richard Nixon, a man for whom Stone has campaigned and supported for years. Stone even has a life-size tattoo of Nixon on his backside. Why would Stone implicate one of his heroes as odd? Or why Stone would implicate one of his heroes as odd unless he was carrying out a cover-up limited hangout operation on behalf of someone else, perhaps the Mossad? Of course, Stone waited until Nixon was dead before he would dare make such an accusation. Investigative journalist and author Michael Collins Piper, who was the world's premier theorist that Israel and Mossad assassinated JFK with help from the Lansky crime syndicate, the CIA, the mob, and others, thoroughly documented in his book, Final Judgment, which I do have, believed that Nixon was not involved in any way in the JFK assassination. Incidentally, Stone's partner in disinformation, Alex Jones, has publicly denied Israel's involvement in the JFK assassination and conspiracy. Now, remember, when I've been saying that because of the fact that so much information has become public, including information that was considered to be left-wing conspiracy, we see that that's been adopted by a right-wing so-called conspiracy theory. But that's basically to throw people off, because some of it has truth and some of it doesn't. And so that's how they confuse the people, because the people don't have the power of discernment nor the desire to do any research on their own, such that if you provide some truth, people assume that it's all true, or if something is not true, the opposition to them will think that it's all not true. And so there's nothing, in the middle. And people don't have the power to discern what's truth and what's not. Anyhow, so there's basically three books now who collaborate this information. So the Final Judgment book, which he identified here, and also Whitney Webb's book, One Nation and the Black Man. Okay, so the JFK assassination plot and the plots against de Gaulle were orchestrated and funded through an international corporate body known as Permendex, a shell corporation which functioned as an asset of Israeli intelligence agency, the Mossad. Shown above is the founding meeting of Permendex. The driving force behind Permendex was the Geneva-based Banque de Crédit International, Banque de Crédit International, BCI, founded by Rabbi Tibor Rosenbaum, Inset Right, a financier and arms procurement officer for the Mossad. Rosenbaum's bank also served as the chief money launderer for the crime syndicate of international mob boss Meyer Lansky, and said left whose criminal empire, of which the so-called mafia was a part, came under fire when the Kennedy administration launched a major crackdown on organized crime. Interesting here to note is that when people think of the mafia or the mob, people typically associate that with Italians. But there was a significant Jewish presence in the mafia, which is not very highly publicized. And no small surprise there, because we know who controls the movies and the media, and so you never see the Jewish influence depicted in the movies. Trump continues the work of Mossad's Permendex by covering up the truth about the JFK assassination. Trump himself also has aided in the cover-up of the JFK assassination by ridiculously claiming that GOP nominee opponent Ted Cruz's father was with JFK's alleged assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, shortly before the president's murder took place. Whether or not Rafael Cruz was with Oswald, handing out pro-Fidel Castro pamphlets in New Orleans in 1963, as Trump, Stone, and National Enquirer story claim, is irrelevant, because Oswald obviously was not the assassin, but was actually what he said he was, a patsy. Trump, whose mentor Roy Cohn sat on the board of Permendix and is tied to men like the Dulles brothers being those who were instrumental in the establishment of the CIA and were head of the CIA, Allen Dulles in particular, I believe it was. One of whom sat on the sham commission set up to pretend to investigate the JFK assassination conspiracy, is endorsing a long debunked official story put out by that very same Warren Commission. The Warren Commission was set up by Israelis Mossad and its allies in the CIA to hide their central role in the murder of Kennedy. Even today, Trump aids and abets the Jewish organization Mossad. He is beholden to them and must not step out of line. The Kinky Stone InfoWars Drudge Echo Chamber. Roger Stone has been an almost daily guest on the InfoWars show over the last several months, always to promote Trump. The endless echo chamber the two have created has been expanded by the likes of other Jewish-controlled alternative media operations like Breitbart and the Drudge Report, which is run by yet another gay Jew, Matt Drudge. Alex Jones could also be sexually compromised. In the leaked divorce with his then Jewish wife, Kelly, in parentheses Violet, which I reported on last year, court documents revealed that Jones was counseled by a team of marriage counselors, with a large number of them specializing in sexual addictions. Jones's ties to Hollywood slime like Charlie Sheen didn't help his public image as an innocent all-American boy. Jones is a divorcee who is known to flirt with women on air, including his own hosts and guests, and apparently hooks his trashy friends up with hookers, like in the case of Amanda Bruce. Again, Trump's ring of supporters reek of sexual compromise, an apparent top-down effect. Unfortunately for Jones, he does not have the excuse of shilling for Israel due to blackmail, at least that we know of. He has been the Zionist's biggest alternative media cheerleader since 1996, long before Jones was divorced and potentially blackmailed. There have been rumors of homosexual affairs involving Jones, but nothing that can be substantiated. Trump appears to take his anti-establishment talking point cues from Alex Jones, as Trump often will say things verbatim that were stated by Alex Jones on his radio show. Indeed, I remember that exactly being the case. There is no question that Jones has acted as Trump's unofficial public relations manager. For months, Jones says campaigned for Trump almost daily on his 3-hour radio broadcast. A Lansky organized crime syndicate. Trump's ties to Lansky organized crime syndicate run by Russian Jewish mob boss of bosses Meyer Lansky do not end at Roy Cohn and his membership on the board of Permendix or at Adnan Khashoggi. In 1987, Trump took over, and we've talked about this before, and so here's just another source validating what we talked about in the previous shows. It says in 1987, Trump took over Lansky's Mossad CIA money laundering front, the Mary Carter Paint Company, then renamed Resorts International from CIA frontman James Crosby. Michael Collins Piper writes, in 1958-59, Dewey and a number of associates used a reported $2 million in CIA funds to buy a controlling interest in the Crosby and Miller Corporation, headed by Dewey friend James Crosby, which was then merged with Mary Carter. Note that Dewey is tied to the cover-up of the JFK assassination conspiracy through the Lansky syndicate. Here again, you see Meyer Lansky. It says, in 1963, Mary Carter Paint spun off his paint division and during the next several years began developing its casino operations, particularly in the Bahamas. In 1967-68, Mary Carter Paint officially changed its name to Resorts International and began massive international expansion. The spotlight determined that several principal investors provided the funds and assets for the venture. Okay. I won't go into this diagram, but it just basically shows, well, we will. The Roy Cohn machine. So it just shows Roy Cohn's connections. And I think it's important because of the relationship between Roy Cohn and Donald Trump. So you see Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, who were both Jewish mobsters, the Bronfmans, who were Canadian Jewish people who made their fortune selling liquor during Prohibition, which ended up becoming the Seagram's Corporation. Ellen Bloomfield, British intelligence, J. Edgar Hoover, Louis Rosenthal, Louis Nichols, Paul Lockwood, Thomas Dewey, J. Edgar Hoover, Thomas Dewey and Meyer Lansky, Mary Carter Paint, Resorts International, David Peck, Roy Cohn, Democratic Party, Dick Morris, Eugene Morris, Law Journal, Larry Cathy Rosenthal, James Finkelstein, and Roy Cohn. Now, of note, Democratic Party, Dick Morris. Okay, so again, this has nothing to do with politics. It's about control. And the same interests control both sides. It doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican. Okay, so the spotlight determined that several principal investors provide the funds and assets for the venture. Piper lists those principal investors as Meyer Lansky, the acknowledged chairman of the board and chief financier of the underworld gambling syndicate, who maintained his own long-standing ties to not only Israel and the Mossad, but also the CIA and the American intelligence community. This is also validated in Whitney Webb's book. And there's Meyer Lansky. David Rockefeller, head of the Rockefeller Financial Empire, who provided his family's clout in CIA and global banking connections to assist in the operation. The investor overseas service, then the world's largest flight capital conglomerate controlling assets worth $2.5 billion. Tibor Rosenbaum, who is not only the Mossad's Swiss-based chief financier behind covert arms deals, but also the head of the Banque de Crédit International of Geneva, the Lansky Syndicate's chief European money laundry. Baron Edmund de Rothschild of the European banking family and a personal business partner, Rosenbaum, in Rosenbaum's Mossad-related ventures ranging far and wide. And lastly, William Mellon Hitchcock, one of the heirs to the Mellon family fortune, one of America's largest private family fortunes, which for many years also maintained close ties with the CIA. Trump eventually dumped his Resorts International investments during his bankruptcy, and the company ceased operations in 2014. It's difficult to believe that the money laundering and skimming of casino profits suddenly stopped when Trump took over the intelligence front. What Lansky's career in crime showed was that casinos were good for stealing from the poor, getting rich, and laundering money for groups interested in carrying out covert and illegal operations. One of Lansky's partners, the late Jewish Louis Lesser, in 1990, sold Donald Trump the Taj Mahal Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City. Trump refers to the syndicate operative Lesser as a legend. After the Mahal went bankrupt, court proceedings revealed Trump's casino was involved in money laundering. Newt Gingrich's Trump lie. And he says, before I go on here, I should point out that it was largely the March 2016 televised propaganda of Zionist neocon Newt Gingrich that led to the public's false perception of Trump as an anti-establishment outsider. On Fox News, Gingrich attempted to paint Trump as not only belonging to the Jewish Mason. On Fox News, Gingrich attempted to paint as not belonging to the Jewish Masonic cryptocracy, which he undoubtedly is a member, likely as a Freemason. Gingrich's lies were televised as part of a script to set up Hillary's strawman false opposition, which he is now shown to be. Okay. The Gingrich lie paved the way for the conservative thinking public to be groomed for Trump to be their hero. You see Newt Gingrich with his yarmulke. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Newt Gingrich prepares to shake hands with Chabadnik Rabbi Moshe Herson after presenting a Congressional Gold Medal during ceremonies on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., June 28th. The medal is given in honor of the late spiritual leader Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who died last year. Jewish casino magnate Carl Icahn, and Icahn was also known to be a corporate raider. Asian casino magnate and hedge fund investor Carl Icahn is yet another apparent Lansky organized crime syndicate operative and friend of Donald Trump. Icahn is tied to the kosher 9/11 Truth movement through John Gray and is connected to Trump-associated Mossad asset Adnan Khashoggi, the Saudi billionaire. Icahn extended a $100 million line of credit to Khashoggi in his failed Genesis Intermedia endeavor, likely an intelligence front and money laundering operation like many of his others. Trump has teased a bid to make Icahn Treasury Secretary should he become U.S. president. Interestingly, Khashoggi and Trump associate Rami El-Bachwari from part one of this series 2 years ago tweeted Icahn the following message. Hi, Carl. How are you? It's been a long time. Icahn, second from the left, and El-Bachwari playing poker. El-Bachwari posted this photo on his Twitter page on December 15th, 2015. Shortly before his closure on October 10th, 2016, Icahn tried to bail out Trump's bankrupt money laundering Taj Mahal. Mahal property was originally part of Lansky's Resorts International Front. Although he was not able to save the resort, Icahn Enterprises gained control over Trump's other bankrupt casino, the Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino run by Trump Entertainment Resorts Incorporated. Icahn took it over this year, 2 years after its filing for bankruptcy. And here you see Trump and Clinton enjoying a day of golf together. The fix, Trump and Clinton in it together. Conclusion. What I have attempted to show here is that U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump is a sexually compromised, which we collaborated last week, or not last week, but the last time we did our show using the book, Dead Men Tell No Lies, the book on Jeffrey Epstein. What I've attempted to show here is that U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump, is a sexually compromised and subsequently blackmailed stooge for the Jewish Masonic cryptocracy, specifically controlled by Israel's Mossad. His public image in the race for president is fake, designed to radicalize the right while pushing the left further into the arms of awaiting candidate Hillary Clinton. A recent WikiLeaks of the Podesta files reveals that the Clinton team wanted extreme Republicans as the best possible opponents leading up to her election win. Of course, she didn't win, but it doesn't matter because they work together. Trump has certainly achieved this by saying all the things the opposition wanted to hear. Today, Trump continues to carry out the Judeo-Masonic agenda while providing catharsis to the alternative right, who take him at face value. So that concludes this section. There was something I wanted to say. I think this is what we've gone through today is particularly of interest, and I think that because this type of information is out there, and some people like myself are aware of Trump's connections to Israel, my thought is that the current rift, if you would call it that, between Trump and Netanyahu is for show. That's my take on it. We'll see. We'll see. But much of the media, we again know who the media is controlled by. The media seems to be eating that up, both the media in Israel and in the United States seems to be playing up this apparent rift between Trump and Israel. But Trump has professed his fealty. So I think that's really just camouflage designed to people to confuse people and throw people off the path. So that's my analysis. We'll see how that ends up unfolding. So I think that covers it for today. I hope you found this to be informative, and we will continue on with this. Maybe we can get our brother Sarvesh before he heads back to India, so we can talk about the Kumbh Mela next time. But there's quite a bit of information still yet for us to unpack here on Trump. So we will continue to do that, and hopefully I'll be able to get in some spiritual shows to keep us grounded. Okay, so I hope this has been beneficial and informative to you. I know it has, but hopefully you will appreciate the information and have something to arm yourself with in your discussions with those who blindly believe everything that Trump and the media says about Trump. Okay, so thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on Journey to Self. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach me at www.sa-ra.org. I provide spiritual relationship counseling services, or you can reach out to me on Facebook. So with that, thanks for joining the Journey to Self. We'll see you next time. Okay.